Have you ever had someone ask you to take down their episode? So you are the host, they are the guest, and they said, "Oh man, I really didn't like that episode. Can you take that down?" Ugh, we have all been there. If you have been podcasting and having guests on your podcast for any amount of time, we've all been in a situation or heard of someone who has been in a similar situation. This does not feel good for the host or the guest. How can we approach this? Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Successful Podcasting Unlocked. I am your host, Alicia Galati. I'm the founder of Galati Media, a full-service podcast management agency where we help business owners launch and maintain lead-generating podcasts. Today's question is, what should I do if my guest asks me to remove their episode? First and foremost, breathe. That is going to help you through all of this. Take a step back. Most of the time, it is not a reflection of the work you have done or about the content that you have created. The majority of the time, it is about something that the guest said that reflected poorly on either them, a story they told, it reflected poorly on the person in the story, or maybe that doesn't align with their business anymore. So how can we avoid this right away? I highly recommend that you have something in your intake form, and you should be having an intake form, something in your intake form that clearly states that you, once the conversation is recorded, will be able to use, shift, transcribe, transfer the information to be used by your company however you see fit. I should preface this by saying that I am in no way giving you legal advice on what to put on your form. You should consult a lawyer for that information, but this is what we have written on ours. It says, by participating in a Listeners to Leads podcast interview, Listeners to Leads is the sister podcast for this one, where I interview podcasters, listen to their journey, hear their struggles, their wonderful wins, the things that they have done to grow a successful podcast or stop podcasting, right? Some of our people have stopped podcasting and they talk about what that looked like and how they came to that decision. And it's a great show. But that aside, so by participating in a Listeners to Leads podcast interview, you agree to allow Galati Media LLC to record, distribute, and disseminate the podcast in any manner. You also agree to allow Galati Media LLC to retain rights to the produced media for monetization or future use in speeches, books, and in all other public distribution. Do you agree? In order to be a guest on my podcast, you have to agree to those terms. If you don't agree to those terms, that's okay. You don't have to be on my podcast, and I'm okay with that. I want to make sure that I'm covering myself, covering my company to be able to distribute this and disseminate these interviews however we see fit. Now, that also includes being able to cut things that do not align with our values, being able to go in and say, that didn't really add value to the conversation, or that side tangent reflects poorly on the person mentioned in the story. We're going to cut that out. You can always take creative liberty with those interviews as a podcast host or as a producer. Inform your producer of what you would like done if you feel any of those kind of inklings from the conversation. But this protects you and it protects the person from being able to come to you and say, I want you to remove my episode. We have had a situation like this where a client said, oh no, I put something in my episode. I did not catch it. The guest was very upset about how it portrayed them. They didn't realize in the moment that it reflected poorly on this other person. What are my options? And so, of course, I'm going to say, well, do you have a form? Cool. Did you say that you have rights to it? Cool. What are some things that we can do before we take the episode down? What are some measures that we can take? And that might look like re-editing the conversation to fit in what the guest said. And sometimes you can just say, is this something that I want to battle? Or do I want to create a better connection with this person by conceding in this moment? Is it worth in the long term to concede this one situation? Or if I concede now, will I feel like I have to concede every time? This is going to be on a case-by-case basis. So don't feel like you have to concede every time that someone says, hey, that didn't feel right, or hey, I don't feel comfortable with that conversation. We've had another client where the person came back and said, I gave a lot of stories about this boyfriend I was with at the time, and it was very lovey-dovey, and I'm not with him anymore, and he did this other thing, and I don't want that episode out anymore. So my client said, nope. That is an episode that went live over a year ago. I'm not going to take it down. I spent money to have it produced. That is not something that I'm going to do. So you have to make the decision for yourself which direction you want to take on moving forward with either taking the episode down completely, cutting out the parts that the guest was maybe uncomfortable with, or just saying, look, you signed this form, you signed this paper, you agreed, I'm allowed to do whatever I want with this content. Sorry, not sorry. To wrap this up, it's important to understand why the person is feeling what they're feeling. What is it about the conversation that they felt needs to be addressed? Is that worth you addressing, cutting some of it, or taking it out completely? As a podcast host, as long as you have some type of form that says that you're allowed to do what you want with the content, then that allows you to be able to say, I can take more creative liberty with this conversation. I can make sure that it aligns with my own values, that it aligns with what my audience needs to hear. And as long as I'm doing that, no one can tell me to take this content down. Or I really want to have this conversation and I really want to keep this connection and keep this bridge instead of burning it. What can I do to ensure that I'm able to do that with this guest without totally taking the episode down because I spent money on producing it, or time or effort or whatever? And what can I do to keep that connection alive? Does it look like completely taking the episode down and biting that bullet? Or does it look like maybe having a conversation to understand a little deeper what it is about the episode that they feel was frustrating or not aligned with what they were trying to say in the moment? Relationships are hard. These are complex. And anytime that you are going to mass produce content, you're going to come across these types of situations. Now, you get to decide how you want to address them, but hopefully these tips, tricks, and strategies were able to support you in kind of coming to a decision on what you would like to do with your particular situation. If you have more podcasting questions, I would love to answer them. So you can go to successfulpodcastingunlocked.com or just successfulpodcasting.com. Both of those will send you to the same place, and you can submit your question to be answered on a future episode. I hope to hear from you soon, and as always, happy podcasting.